The American air planners hoped the attacks would be precise and powerful enough to bring Iraq to its knees. To begin with, the army occupying Kuwait would hardly be touched. Instead, strategic targets all over Iraq would be obliterated.
Imagine Iraq like a human body. What happens if you take away somebody's ability to think, somebody's ability to communicate with the rest of the body? What happens if you sever their spinal cord? They can't function, right?
Before the planes could attack, a unit known as Task Force Normandy had a critical role. Its Apache helicopter crews had been training for months. Their mission: to destroy at all costs 2 radar sites that could give Baghdad early warning of what was to come. It was a moonless night. 8 Apache helicopters laden with Hellfire missiles took off towards Iraq. This is a pilot's eye view, video from one helicopter's night vision camera. The gunships flew a few feet off the ground until they were 8 miles from the radar dishes.
We slowed our airspeed to about 40 knots, came up online, all abreast, so we're all at the same distance from the target. And at this point, I'm not looking through my goggles, I'm looking at a TV screen right in front of me. Watched the clock tick to 0. I gave the code word, "Get some." At that point, everybody fired their Hellfires.
Get some. Second missile.
From a range of 4 miles, each crew aimed a laser beam to guide the Hellfire missiles. The Iraqis had anti-aircraft guns but could not see or hear the helicopters. In the age of the computer, war was about to assume the aspect of a video game.
They're still in there. Okay. Hit that one, slide on the left. Hit that one. Okay.
With the initial blast of the Hellfire, then we really saw some activity in the target.
You're lined up. Firing.
Iraqi soldiers ran through the crosshairs.
Now. All right. Hold her steady. Got it. Stay with it. There it goes.
The attack lasted 4 minutes.
I select my gun. I've got very bright flashes of light to my left and right as the Hellfires are leaving. People running around in the site, and underneath my goggles I can see the explosions. My wingman firing is 30 millimeter, the muzzle flashes from that.
Okay, did you get the
Out of the probably 150 people that we were briefed were at the site, I would imagine not more than 10 or 20 probably lived through that engagement.
Time to launch, 1 minute, sir.
Off the coast, the US Navy prepared to launch dozens of cruise missiles. But the missiles couldn't navigate over featureless desert, so they were secretly programmed to fly over the mountains of Iran and then turn towards Baghdad.
050. Attack 48 east.
The Iranians had no idea of any of this. The Navy commander prayed nothing would go wrong.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch.
In Baghdad, the guns began to fire. 10 stealth bombers were minutes away. They were designed to be invisible to radar, but as insurance, the US Air Force started to jam Baghdad's radar. The jamming gave the game away. The defenders' radar screens were blinded, but 3,000 anti-aircraft guns and 60 missile batteries fired wildly into the sky.
That night, orders came from headquarters to fire back any way we could, even if it meant closing our eyes and firing into the sky. It was so dark, and the aircraft were coming so quickly, and we didn't have the capability to aim accurately. That's why they told us, put up a barrage of fire any way you can.
In the approaching stealth bombers, the pilots saw the firestorm of shells and missiles exploding above the city. They flew straight towards it.
As I'm flying in, the aircraft was actually being buffeted by the AAA exploding. Looking back, it's kind of like an old World War II movie where they sit in the cockpit of their B-29s and bounce around over Dresden.
Dolson destroyed Iraq's main telephone exchange.
I just remember looking over my shoulder, and I thought to myself, you know, it's a miracle. There's no way anybody else is coming out of there.
But his wingman was still in the center of the barrage.
Stuff going off all around you, under you, you know, some of it arcing over above you. I know that I've trained my whole Air Force career to make sure that I could do this, and now did I have the right stuff now?
Leatherman destroyed the main telephone mast. Another laser-guided bomb hit the headquarters controlling Baghdad's air defenses. Other pilots destroyed government ministries and a key communication tower. Also targeted Saddam's lakeside palace.
What we wanted to do was sever his ability to communicate with his frontline forces. And if that meant killing him, then so be it.
Holy cow. That was a large airburst that we saw. It was filling the sky with dust. And I think, John, that airburst took out the telecommunications.
CNN journalists gave a running commentary to the outside world. 6 minutes after the stealth bombers left, the crew's missiles arrived. Some destroyed government buildings. Others dropped carbon filament to short the electrical grid system. The president and his aides watched the war unfold on television.
This is one of those times when I really had a sense of history. I had the battle plan on my lap, and we were sitting here watching CNN, and to see the battle unfolding from the CNN parts, when the CNN announcer, a couple of minutes after the first radar should have been hit on the border, that we have reports of airstrikes down in the southern part of the country. So it was uncanny.
With the initial attacks complete, an armada of coalition aircraft headed for targets all over Iraq. Hundreds of planes took to the air. Despite the initial successes, scores were expected not to return. As the battle unfolded, Norman Schwarzkopf sent a message to his troops.
Soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, this morning at 0300, we launched Operation Desert Storm. My confidence in you is total. Our cause is just. Now, you must be the thunder and lightning of Desert Storm. Planes were in the air at that time, heading towards their targets, with no guarantees of the outcome. To know that we had taken a very big step and that the war had started and none of us knew exactly how it was going to end, it's a very, very emotional moment.
With key air defense headquarters destroyed, Iraqi fighters couldn't operate. Only a few managed to struggle into the air.
Our fighter aircraft had orders to attack, but who? The radar was blank.
The first Iraqi fighter of the war was shot down.
And I see that somebody's targeted on me. It's an Iraqi fighter who wants to target me and shoot me down. And so I remember firing a missile. I remember seeing this big blue flame coming across the sky, 3 to 5 seconds long. And I remember seeing it, and then it goes away. I remember thinking to myself that my missile hit him and that the target's destroyed and that he's down, but what's ahead?
first 24 hours consisted of more attacks in the master attack plan than the entire number of targets that were targeted in the years 1942 and 1943 during the combined bomber offensive in Europe.
That night marked a new point in warfare. Precision bombing had become a reality. Only one Allied pilot was killed. At the White House, the politicians were euphoric.
The first night of the war, everybody was, in heaven. They saw these strikes go in very successfully. Casualties were almost nil. Television pictures of bombs going down chimney stacks and all that sort of stuff. And some of the reporters were running around saying, this is going to be over right away. And I had to call down to the Pentagon press office and tell them, shut those guys up. We have just started a war. It isn't a one-day affair. It's not going to be over before the next commercial break.
Just before dawn, the RAF attacked an airbase near Basra, Iraq's second city. Lacking American technology, for years the RAF had trained to surprise the enemy by flying low and fast. It was not a tactic they'd had the chance to use on a modern battlefield.
Out there it was burning blue. I mean, it was probably 8 o'clock in the morning, at 8:30, and it was blue sky and the visibility was 1,000 miles.
We were flying at maybe 60 or 70 feet and about 500 or 600 miles an hour, and there's this huge explosion and a flash, and the aircraft was hit by a missile.
Well, I had blue above my head. Suddenly the desert was above my head and it was just tumbling. The aircraft was tumbling and I was pushing the stick and I couldn't do anything.
The last thing we wanted to do at that point was actually eject, because we knew we were very close to whoever actually hit us.
I was going, eject, eject, and John said, don't bloody well eject, don't bloody... And I was going, eject. And eventually I just grabbed, we have the swing wing obviously in the Tornado, and I threw the lever forward and the aircraft righted itself.
We struggled back into controlled flight, for want of a better expression.
John said, we're on fire, and I said, I know we're on fire, And he said, no, look back. And I looked back, and all I saw was a bright orange ball.
I couldn't see the back of the aircraft. All it was a ball of fire, and the fire was spreading its way down the spine of the aircraft towards me.
And then you say, this aircraft is going no further. And then you go, give me the ejection drills,
It's actually half a second between pulling the handle and being thrown clear of the aircraft, and that half a second's like a lifetime.
And then it's as if someone, a huge giant, just grabs you by the shoulder. He yanks you up, and I remember my head going forward.
And then there's the crack as the canopy opens, and you're left in your parachute. And it's deathly silent, and there we were about to land in the desert in Iraq.
And then you realise how big the desert is, and how clear the sky is.
We'd gone from these modern-day nights on our high-tech Chargers, flashing around the sky in £20 million worth of technology, and suddenly there we were, two very sad pink bodies in the desert.
Then, after about 3 hours, we saw some Iraqis coming towards us.
And shots started to ring out, and they were shooting at us. They were trying to kill us.
And we were down low, and I can't see it. And I remember John looking at him here as we were down and going, should we go out with a bang? And I don't know why. I just said, no, there's always hope.